I reversed osteoporosis naturally without the bone drugs when I was 61 years old. Now I'm 64. I'm also into overall health. Welcome to GloryB-TV, a lifestyle channel for mature women who want to look fabulous, feel amazing, and age gracefully. There is an unwritten code of conduct within YouTube that is between YouTube channel creators. There are two parts to this code of conduct. Number one, don't write negative or disagreeable comments on another channel's videos. Number two, don't say negative things about a particular channel creator or their content on your own videos. This code of conduct was broken when another channel creator posted an entire negative piece about me, specifically about my content on his video. I contacted several other creators I know to ask about this phenomenon of speaking negatively about another creator and or their content on a video. A majority of them replied they've seen this done once and consider this practice to be horrible and a catty thing to do. With that, I'm not going to leave it alone. I will address it here on this video. What video by another creator am I talking about? It's a hit piece by Dr. Doug Lucas, who has a business which charges a lot of money to consult with people who have osteoporosis. I'm going to review a lot of information in this video, so buckle up. Here is the list of topics I'll cover. Number one, what is a single issue diet? Number two, who Doug Lucas really disagrees with. Here's a hint, it's not me. Number three, Lucas's disagreement with chiropractors and others who practice functional medicine. Number four, Lucas's sales funnel, which leads to his $12,000 a year program versus other less costly options. Number five, the Epic Oxford study and what Lucas assumes regarding the vegetarian and vegan subjects in that study. Number six, the transcript of Lucas's video. We'll go through some of it. Let's start with number one, single issue diet. Well, several years ago, I was speaking with a young man in his 20s who told me that while he was in college, there was a presidential election. He was planning to be a secondary education teacher, and as he decided who to vote for, he chose his candidate based on one issue related to teaching, as the policy regarding education and teaching which this candidate espoused was a policy the young man supported. His candidate won and was still in office as we had this conversation. So now it was a couple years later. The young man was out of college and struggling to make ends meet. He told me he realized there are many issues a political candidate supports, and in hindsight, he should have looked at all of the policies which both candidates espoused and then made his voting decision based on as many issues as possible, not just on one issue. After he told me the story, I told him I agreed, because it's never a good idea to do single issue voting. Likewise, it's not a good idea to choose a diet based on one single health issue, and that is what Lucas is doing here. I don't think his diet recommendations are good for bone growth or bone health, and that's my opinion. Furthermore, and most importantly, my diet choice since 1998 is based on overall health, not just for one health issue. My diet prevents heart disease, high blood pressure, strokes, type 2 diabetes, cancer, autoimmune issues, etc. Now, does my diet mean I will be immortal? No, of course not. Does my diet mean I won't eventually grow older and die of something? No, of course not. But my diet sure does slow it down. Here is something for all of you with osteoporosis to consider. If you live in the United States, according to U.S. data, you're much more likely to die of heart disease or cancer than you are to die from osteoporosis or from osteoporosis-related issues, such as from falling or breaking a bone. How do I know this? Let's look at the data. The CDC is a few years behind on posting data. Well, here is the latest they have available as of the recording of this video in January 2024. Deaths from heart disease in 2021 were 695,000 deaths. The deaths from cancer in 2020 were 602,347. Now let's look at deaths from osteoporosis. Well, they don't have death statistics for osteoporosis or from falls or from bone breaks. In another longer document that the CDC has on bone breaks, the words death or deaths doesn't appear anywhere in the document. The number of deaths annually from osteoporosis or from a fall or bone breaks is so small that the number of deaths aren't even listed, noted, or written about in any of the CDC documentation I examined. But for heart disease and cancer, the number of deaths for each are prominently displayed in the CDC's data. The CDC is behind on reporting the data, like I said. I expect for 2021, 22, and 23 that the number of U.S. deaths from heart disease and cancer will increase if the CDC reports accurately. Now, what did I say earlier? You're more likely to die of heart disease or from cancer than you are to die from osteoporosis, a fall, or a bone break. The data supports that claim. So why are you chasing down a diet which will contribute to you getting heart disease, strokes, and or cancer? And I'm not just an influencer saying this, as Lucas claims. Plenty of others, which include doctors, say this as well. Now let's look at one of the doctors whose clinical experience and clinical data supports what I've said. Now, actually, I support what this doctor is saying, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. I'm quoting and promoting what Esselstyn says, even though Lucas wants you to believe I'm just an influencer quoting myself. Dr. Esselstyn has been treating heart patients for years, and here's the best part. Esselstyn has been reversing all levels of heart disease in his patients, and he has done it through diet. Not using the diet that Lucas recommends you eat, but through a whole food, plant-based diet, which is also what I recommend you eat. Esselstyn documented this in his book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, the revolutionary, scientifically proven, nutrition-based cure. Dr. Esselstyn also eats a whole food, plant-based diet. He is still practicing medicine at the age of 90. His daughter often posts videos of him bicycling and doing all kinds of activities, as well as of her mother, activities that only healthy people can do. Number 2, who Doug Lucas really disagrees with, and I gave you a hint, it's not me. Lucas isn't disagreeing with me alone, even though that is how he worded it several times in his video. In contrast, Doug Lucas is disagreeing with many doctors who not only agree with me, but everything I do and everything I've said here on YouTube follows their advice. I'm working towards setting up video interviews with several of them. Now, it may take a while for me to do that. Why? Because these doctors are very busy. The reason they're so busy is because they've helped thousands of people worldwide to gain and maintain exceptional health, which has placed all of these doctors in high demand. Here is a list of some of the doctors with whom Doug Lucas disagrees. Dr. Joel Fuhrman, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, Dr. Frank Sabatino, Dr. Joel Kahn, Dr. Columbus Batiste, Dr. Michael Clapper, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Kim Allen Williams, Dr. Stephen Lohm, Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Stefan Esser, Dr. Anthony Lim, Dr. Monica Agarwal, Dr. Greg Fitzgerald, Dr. Nathan Gersfeld, Dr. John McDougall. Links to these doctors' websites, if they have one, and to either a video interview or a book are in the description box below the video. Let's look at 3 of these doctors. Dr. Joel Fuhrman may sound familiar from his lectures on PBS. I have 2 of his many books, Fasting and Eating for Health and Eat to Live. Joel calls his diet plan nutritarian. Joel wouldn't agree with Doug Lucas's diet plan, as Joel has already written about, spoken about, and proven that the whole food plant-based diet works well long-term for the best overall health. Dr. Alan Goldhammer, I've highlighted him before. He leads a team of MDs, DCs, and others at True North Health Center in California. I've referred several of my viewers to Dr. Goldhammer and his team. Dr. Goldhammer has noted that many people who call themselves vegetarian or vegan are actually ethical vegans because of their love for animals. And many of those people are chosen to be subjects in medical type studies where those studies wanted vegetarians or vegans included as subjects. Dr. Goldhammer had this to say about the health of ethical vegans.
Salt, oil, and sugar is really hard, like you said, for those ethical vegans. I've experienced that throughout the years with the vegans I know.
Ethical vegans may go to heaven because they're kinder, gentler people, but they won't delay how quickly they get there unless they get rid of the salt, oil, and the sugar. So if you want to get to heaven, but also delay how quickly you enter, adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet.
Dr. Stephen Lone has been interviewed on this channel before. He was an overweight, unhealthy doctor several years ago, many years ago, until he discovered the whole food, plant-based diet way of life. Now, he and his wife, who is also a doctor, are raising their children in a whole food, plant-based household, resulting in a very healthy family. He is a cardiologist who focuses on getting patients well through diet, much like Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, even though, as a cardiologist, Dr. Lone could make a lot more money letting people eat themselves sick and then performing expensive heart procedures on those sick patients. Dr. Lone chose the high road. Number 3, Lucas's disagreement with chiropractors and those who practice functional medicine. Now, this piece is in the transcript, but I want to review it now. So the doctor I refer many of my patients to is Dr. Denise Shostek. Dr. Shostek has helped many of my viewers to figure out why they have osteoporosis and or why their osteoporosis isn't improving and how to eliminate the causes so that their body builds real strong bone. She is a chiropractor and naturopath. She understands why my viewers don't want to take the bone drugs. Now let's look at what Lucas says about chiropractors.
Now let me speak to the chiropractor comment. So I am not against chiropractic. I think chiropractors serve a great role in our healthcare system, or in the medicine 3.0 side, as I like to call it. Chiropractors can do wonderful, wonderful work. They are generally, in my experience, going to really stick to what they do best.
And there it is. Lucas says he isn't against chiropractic, but then he goes on to denigrate, in particular, Dr. Shostek, as if she cannot address osteoporosis. He says chiropractors should really stick to what they do best. Let's continue.
But where I do see a challenge with some chiropractors is when they get into a space where they start to practice really what is kind of a naturopathic style of medicine, a functional medicine, depending on what their credentials are. And sometimes they'll even be DCs and naturopathic doctors. But in different states, you have different licensing capacity, you have different practice rights. And so they may not be able to provide all of the things that a physician-led program can provide. And so even if they have great knowledge, they might not be able to provide a full service program. Then a lot of times they actually don't have great knowledge because it doesn't take a lot for someone to call themselves, a functional medicine, quote unquote, doctor. You can go to a 2-day seminar and call yourself a functional medicine doctor. That's why it's kind of a dirty term. So,
and let's stop there. And there it is. For the millions of us who have experienced gaining health, and not through MDs, but through chiropractors, naturopaths, or even through MDs who are practicing functional or lifestyle medicine and actually getting people well through nutrition, we know what Lucas really thinks of anyone who is competing with him. If these other specialists weren't getting patients well, they wouldn't have the great numbers of referrals to new patients. Let's continue.
So I think we have to be careful when we say, this doctor is, an expert in this thing. And the question I would ask is why. So anyway, I'm not saying anything bad about this doctor either.
Well, really he is. That's exactly what he's doing. And then this is called gaslighting. Now, because it fits in really well here, I'm going to play a piece that is toward the end of his transcript, which is what Lucas said about doctors.
Her channel is great for what it is. But when you want to know about nutrition, you might want to listen to somebody who has a lot of training in nutrition.
Now he claims to have a lot of training in nutrition. He's only been doing this for a short time in his career. Meanwhile, these other doctors I've mentioned, such as Furman, Goldhammer, Sabatino, Kahn, Batiste, Clapper, Barnard, Esselstyn, Williams, Long, and Greger, and the rest of them have trained in nutrition. And depending on their ages, they've been successfully getting hundreds or even thousands of people well using whole food plant-based nutrition. Now, these doctors are the doctors who have a lot of training plus experience in nutrition.
Want to know about medicine? Talk to somebody who has a lot of background in medicine.
Well then, if you want to talk to somebody who has a lot of background in medicine, then the list of doctors I mentioned and posted in the description box gives you a boatload of doctors who have a much longer background in medicine, nutrition, and in getting patients well. Lucas is a young man and doesn't have the long experience in medicine and in getting patients well compared to about 80% of the doctors on that list. Number 4, Lucas's sales funnel, which leads to his $12,000 per year program versus other less costly options. Well, one of my favorite topics. Let's talk about cost. First, we'll start with the cost of Doug Lucas's program. Now, this is his sales funnel. The goal is to get you to purchase his $12,000 a year program. The cost as I'm filming in January 2024 is $12,799 a year. So the sales funnel actually starts with his YouTube videos, and those, of course, are free. Now that we go to the actual sales funnel, the first level is a free program, which will give you more information regarding his ideas about reversing osteoporosis. The second level costs $12.99 per month, and it's paid annually, it says on the website, which works out to $155.88 per year. You get more information than in the free program, weekly live Q&A sessions, but none of it is specific to your health issues, such as blood work, other tests, or working with a doctor to interpret or diagnose that is specific to you. The third level of his sales funnel costs $12,799 per year as of this video recording. For this, you get biannual blood work and analysis, biannual consultations with an exercise physiologist, up to biweekly appointments with a registered dietitian. So is that 2 per week? And if you miss one, do they roll over? I don't know. Unlimited messaging with team members. And what does that mean? What type of help are you allowed to get via those messages? I don't know. A functional test and as needed retest of critical lab values and a couple other things. If your osteoporosis is so bad, or you've tried to reverse it naturally and it hasn't reversed in a timely manner like it did for me, then it's likely that you'll need help reversing osteoporosis for 2 years or for 3 years, not just for 1 year. If you have that kind of cash, $12,799 for 1 year, or even $25,598 for 2 years, or $38,397 for 3 years, and you want to pay Doug Lucas that kind of money, then you are free to do that. Remember, for this patient-specific program, it will cost you at least $12,799, and that is only for 1 year. All right, now what are your alternatives? Number 1, work with one of these other doctors I've mentioned here already. Check their links that I provided in the description box. Some of them may do telemedicine. Now remember, all of them approach health as an overall health strategy, not just for osteoporosis, and not only for growing strong bones. And I don't know what they charge, so you'll need to do some research. Alternative number 2, work with Dr. Denise Shostek via telemedicine. She has done telemedicine with many of my viewers, most of whom came to her for help with reversing osteoporosis. And for many of them, they have other health issues in addition to osteoporosis, or they have somewhat mysterious reasons for why the osteoporosis isn't reversing by doing all the things that I did that worked for me. In an earlier video, Dr. Shostek and I discussed what it's like to do telemedicine with her, how it works, how much of your time is involved, and what it costs. Now, that video is linked in the description box, in the first comment, and in a card. At the time of this video, the cost for the telemedicine visit with Dr. Shostek, plus her evaluation and recommendations, all for one fee, is $289. Now, some viewers also choose to do a 6-month follow-up visit with her, which is currently $75. If you're doing the math, that works out to a total of $364. Remember, this is for a patient-specific evaluation. It's not just a Q&A appointment. This is based on full blood work per her recommendation, plus any other tests she deems necessary. So this can't be compared to Lucas's second-level sales funnel item, which costs $155 per year. Remember, that plan of his isn't specific to you as a patient. Dr. Shostek's $289 telemedicine, or $364 if you also do the follow-up appointment 6 months later, is only comparable to another patient-specific program, which in Lucas's case is his $12,799 per year program. Now remember, with all of what I talk about, I'm referring to overall health, not just osteoporosis. If you want to achieve the overall health as I have, then why not start where I started, which is reading Mary Lou Henner's book, Total Health Makeover. And this is what I call alternative number 3. Now, as I said in the past, I'm so glad I didn't have the attitude which says only doctors can talk about and lead people to excellent health and nutrition. When I read that book by Mary Lou Henner, there wasn't YouTube or Instagram or Facebook. Mary Lou Henner was an influencer. I thank God every day that I didn't have the attitude of Doug Lucas toward influencers, and in this case, toward influencer Mary Lou Henner. Now let's see what Lucas said about influencers. This is a little long from his video, but I want you to understand what he said about influencers.
As I'm going to walk through a particular influencer, how she has put her experience out as a way that everybody should follow as if it's a roadmap, and then leaning on evidence that is extremely flawed and pointing to it to say that it proves her point. And this is something that really frustrates me when I see this happening, because when you have an influencer who doesn't have a medical background or is not trained to do nutrition, medical therapy, and then they're saying something that sounds a whole lot like advice, and then not saying it from a medical perspective because they can lean on a friend of theirs or potentially this paper, you're then relying on that influencer and their interpretation of that paper. And so that's fine. And again, I'm all for freedom of speech because I'm out here speaking publicly on a worldwide platform as well. I don't want to be censored, but understand what other influencers, what their background is. If they don't say what their background is, then you should probably try to find out, or potentially, view that recommendation skeptically. So I'm going to go through one influencer's recommendations today, and we're going to go through not her story, and I'm not going to rip on her.
He says he's not going to rip on me or rip on Dr. Shostek. What he really did is he ripped on what I've had to say and on my content and what Dr. Shostek's had to say and on her content. But as I've talked about in this video, he's also ripping on all these other doctors and what they've said.
But what I'm going to do is talk about the evidence that she's bringing forward to saying that this proves her theory, which very clearly disagrees with mine. And so we're going to talk about the evidence. We're going to do this from an evidence perspective, being as objective as we can. And we'll let you decide, because ultimately this is your journey. So stick around, because we're going to go through this and kind of in a controversial way, but I really feel like this has to be said because I get asked questions on this particular influencer all the time, and clearly my views are different from hers. All right, so the influencer that I'm talking about is GloryB, or GloryB-TV. Now, again, I am not going to sit here and say bad things about GloryB. I think her channel is totally fine, and she does a great job, and her videos look good, and she's out there, promoting the things that she believes in. I think it's totally fine.
All right, so after saying these things and attempting to sound like the nice guy, you'll see he proceeds to not rip on me, but rip on my content, rip on what I have to say, and rip on Dr. Shostek. The thing is, he has no idea that I'm actually following all these other doctors. But when you say one thing and then you do another, that's called gaslighting. Or when you say you're not going to do something and then you do it anyway and then say you didn't do it, that's gaslighting.
The challenge is that when I see her start to talk about medical things and I see her lean on her doctor friend who's a chiropractor and
Okay, I have to interrupt here. I'm not just leaning on my doctor friend. I'm leaning on all of the other doctors who I have covered and will cover in this video. They're listed in the description box. Just so many people, not just leaning on my doctor friend. That's so ridiculous.
I'll speak to that in a second. She leans on her and her expertise, and then she talks about evidence, and she links to the evidence, and so this is great. But we don't really get a chance in these videos to explore the evidence. She doesn't talk about the evidence.
I want my viewers to study for themselves. That's why I provide many links to articles that link to studies, or I link directly to studies, real studies, not the fake studies that use the fake vegetarians and the fake vegans. I link directly to them, and I encourage you in my videos to do your own research. Doug Lucas, as you'll see, wants you to purchase his $12,000 a year program.
And that's not really her platform in the way that she would do that. And so I think it's important that if we're thinking that the way that she's saying is right, we should look at this from a different perspective and actually explore that evidence.
With all of this talk about influencers, why have I mentioned many of the whole food plant-based doctors? Well, because many of you will only listen to doctors. I understand that. So I want to give you doctor options. Now we're on to alternative number 4. If your osteoporosis is manageable, like mine was, and you want your health and your aging, and remember I'm 64 now, to be more like mine and like Mary Lou Henner's, but you have a difficult time making changes to improve your overall health, and as we know, changes to diet and health are all about creating new habits and eliminating old habits, then for $129, which is the cost at the time of this video, you can take my Kickstart Your Health course, which walks you through step by step, changing your diet and improving your health in ways that are encouraging, will help you to lose weight, and will help you to feel so good you won't want to go back to the old ways and the old habits. And that $129, it's not an annual fee where you will no longer have access to the course after 12 months. No, the $129 is a one-time fee for lifetime access to the course. If I update anything in the course, it's included. The course is linked in the description box, in the first comment, and hopefully in a card. You know what? I had osteoporosis once. So what? As I've already said, even the CDC doesn't report on the number of deaths from osteoporosis, nor from bone breaks or from falls, because the numbers are so low. You're much more likely to die from heart disease or cancer. Why not do something preventative about that now? Number 5, the epic Oxford study and what Lucas assumes regarding the vegetarian and vegan subjects. As I said earlier, when I spoke about Dr. Alan Goldhammer, many times when researchers look at the health of vegetarians or vegans, the people they're studying simply eliminate animal foods from their diets. The remaining food they eat is largely processed food, and their diets are not whole food plant-based. On top of that, most of the healthy doctors I listed earlier are also what's called SOS-free, which means their diets don't have added salt, oil, or sugar. I can take an educated guess here and be pretty guaranteed about accuracy that the vegetarian and vegan subjects in the epic Oxford study, which Doug Lucas referred to in his video, were not eating a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, and certainly not an SOS-free diet. I'm going to get with as many of the doctors I listed to see what they already know about these studies that include vegans, and in particular, the epic Oxford study. Number 6, the transcript of Lucas's video, just the highlights. I've already played a couple pieces from Lucas's video transcript. I hope you're still with me. Let's play some of my favorite parts from the earlier part of this video.
If you go online, you will see influencers and doctors talk about every different aspect of nutrition you can imagine, and they are so conflicting, and it is really frustrating. And I'm all for free speech.
He's all for free speech. Did you hear that? So keep that in mind.
And so what I'm really doing is trying to support an objective perspective, but I'm trying to put out my experience, and that is going to reflect my bias. I try to be as non-biased as I can.
He can't be non-biased. He's selling a $12,000 program. I already played the piece about influencer who doesn't have a medical background, and chiropractors should really stick to what they do best. Moving on.
I'm going to talk about these sources. So what she does is she points to a couple of different articles I'll talk, but we'll spend most of our time talking about this place called the SAVE Institute. Now, this is the first time I'd seen this.
Oh, pause. It's the first time he has seen this. He has never heard of the SAVE Institute, which is saveourbones.com. Meanwhile, its leader, Vivian, has helped thousands of people reverse osteoporosis without the bone drugs. The SAVE Institute is one of the first groups he should have found when he decided to focus on people who have osteoporosis.
But the SAVE Institute is apparently an organization that has a lot of content around bone health. And so I enjoyed kind of looking through their content, and they're doing a good job of putting content out there. But as we'll see when we go through this, their perspective is very biased, and they are a plant-based or vegan, seemingly, organization. And they push everything in a plant-based direction, which again that is their right to do, but it is also our right to explore the evidence that they're putting forward and then how they interpret that evidence.
Meanwhile, Lucas is choosing to ignore the thousands of people who reversed osteoporosis successfully based on what the SAVE Institute teaches. In addition, the leader of the SAVE Institute, Vivian, and I don't agree on several points regarding reversing osteoporosis. However, neither of us have mentioned these points of which we disagree on social media. Vivian hasn't gone to YouTube to create a video stating which points she disagrees with me about. I haven't gone to YouTube to create a video stating which points I disagree with her about. And do you know why? Because it's bad form. And because of what I said in the beginning of this video, there is an unwritten code of conduct between YouTube channel creators and an unwritten understanding which says it is bad form to do that.
One of the things that she talks about a lot, though, is diet. And she talks a lot about being a vegan and how a vegan approach is the right way to reverse osteoporosis. And so this is where I have an issue, which is that when somebody promotes a specific style of eating for everybody, that makes the hair on my back stand up a little bit.
Lucas not only has a problem with me saying this, he has a problem with all of the doctors I follow who say this. I didn't make up all of this myself. I've already noted many of the doctors I follow from whom the basis of what I have said comes from. And it's not just for bone health, it's for overall health. And as many of them have said about diet, people like to hear good news about their bad habits.
And then the whole concept of using a plant-based approach for reversing osteoporosis leans on this concept of pH balance. I've talked about this before. I have other videos on it, but we're going to kind of go down this pH rabbit hole here and use this evidence that she's supporting as proving her point as evidence to actually support the opposite point. The doctor that she leans on in a lot of her videos, name is Dr. Shostek. She is also of a similar age. And as I mentioned,
He is not correct about this. While I've interviewed Dr. Shostek in my videos, I have an entire gaggle of other doctors I've been following for years, some of whom I've met, who support the premise of what I did nutritionally and what I continue to do. They do as well, and they are incredibly healthy, and they all look years younger than they are. The doctors I lean on in my videos I've already discussed. I've discussed them before in other videos as well.
So you can see from this little minute-long clip that she's really saying that if you're consuming acid-forming food, that it's going to cause erosion of minerals from your bone, and that you need to eat an alkaline diet, which is a plant-based diet, and avoid all the things. And she very clearly says meat right out of the gate. She also talks about dairy, alcohol, added sugars, and some of those things I'll agree.
I have also discussed and linked to an article by Dr. Michael Clapper about this very issue. Dr. Clapper is among the MDs I follow who've helped thousands of patients get well, and their basic change for the patients is a whole food plant-based diet. When Lucas says he disagrees with me, he is actually disagreeing with these other doctors, including Dr. Michael Clapper.
Dr. Clapper is clearly a plant-based doctor. He has a website and a platform and a YouTube channel. He talks about basically medicine through the use of nutrition and eating a plant-based diet. So clearly we can see what his bias is going to be. Now, he wrote this article that GloryB points to, and in this article, he makes some, I think, really good recommendations about how to improve bone health, and I'm going to talk about those. What's interesting, though, is as I read through the article, what it doesn't do is say to avoid eating meat.
Something is wrong with Lucas's interpretation of Dr. Clapper's article. On the third page of the article, there is an inset which reads, quote, "This food does not nourish healthy bones," unquote, and there are photos in the inset of meat. Dr. Clapper does spend more time in the article writing about dairy having a negative effect on the bones, likely because we were fed with the ads and commercials for years that dairy builds strong bones. Looking a bit more at Lucas's comments about the EPIC Oxford study.
What's amazing about this study is that it actually sees past the healthy user bias of vegans and vegetarians because they tend to also make other perceivingly healthy choices.
As I said earlier, that really isn't true. There are many vegetarians and vegans who don't make other healthy choices because their reasons for not eating meat or not eating any animal-based foods is solely based on their love for animals. They're also known as ethical vegans. We'll go back to play another part of Dr. Goldhammer's interview video because this is very important. This full interview with Dr. Alan Goldhammer is also linked in the description box below the video.
You go look at spiritual issues. So moral, ethical, and spiritual issues drive most vegans. Health issues may not be at the top of the list. So many vegans will eat terrible diets, but they're vegan. But, soda pop, French fries, Oreo cookies, these can all be vegan in the sense they have no animal food. It doesn't make them healthy. So what makes them healthy is not just not having the animal component, but also not having the sugar, oil, and salt, not having the hyper-processed foods. That's the primary culprit in leading to obesity and the consequences. So what we advocate is a whole plant food diet that's free of salt, oil, and sugar. And it's, a little bit more challenging to implement because the world's designed to give you what you want, not what you need. And what you want is how to engage in short-term pleasure-seeking, self-indulgent behavior, preferably without paying the price. What you need is to learn how to escape the pleasure trap. Ethical vegans may go to heaven because they're kinder, gentler people, but they won't delay how quickly they get there.
Let's continue.
Choices, some of which are likely going to be healthy, like going to bed on time and eating regular meals and not drinking and not smoking and all the other things that go along with being healthy because they have the discipline and the desire to live a vegan and vegetarian life if they're doing it for health purposes.
If they're doing it for health purposes, which most are not. And likely this study included unhealthy vegetarians and unhealthy vegans.
This study actually looked through that.
This study actually looked through that. It did? What is the evidence that this study looked at how healthy of a diet these vegetarian and vegan subjects were actually eating?
And it's really hard to do that statistically. So even though us omnivores will likely make some other bad choices, and eating a burger and fries and milkshake has so many potential bad things in it, it still looks better for bone health than does a vegan and vegetarian diet.
Your study doesn't prove that. The study doesn't say who these vegetarians and vegans were, nor do we know what they were actually eating. You just told us you were assuming that because they're vegetarian and because they're vegan, that they're also healthy in other ways. I'm saying, number one, we don't know if they are the types of eaters who eat what Dr. Goldhammer said they might eat, which is unhealthy food, albeit vegan, or if they eat a whole food plant-based no SOS diet. And number two, we don't know if these test subjects are actually healthy people.
So then what about GloryB? Well, again, I am not ripping on GloryB.
Well, he pretty much did just that. Are there, it's the tricky word thing. So he spent the whole video ripping on my content and on what I say. All right. He wants the viewers to purchase his programs. And viewers won't do that if they're getting well and reversing osteoporosis by doing what I did. And they won't purchase his programs if they choose to work with Dr. Shostek for $289.
I'm just pointing out that while being a vegan, she thinks is part of what makes her very healthy, and it very well may be. I just want to point out one thing, that is that she's a 35-year vegan who developed osteoporosis.
As I said earlier, I had osteoporosis. So what? I reversed it. My diet ensures that I won't get heart disease, which is more likely to kill all of us.
What do you think one of her risk factors was? So when she says that eating this way, the thing that may have led her to have osteoporosis in the first place, eating this way is the way to get better, it just makes me want to be defensive. And so this is me being defensive in an objective way.
Regarding diet and health, like many of these doctors, the whole food plant-based doctors, whose names I included earlier, have quoted, saying, people like to hear good news about their bad habits. People don't want to change their diets or don't want to change their diets by much. They'd rather have someone tell them they can keep eating meat and keep eating dairy. Well, this has been long. It's a good thing I'm a healthy, vegan, whole food plant-based woman, because for most 64-year-olds, going through a video like Lucas's and evaluating it as I have would be exhausting. Make sure to check the resources in the description box, in the first comment, and in the cards. Evaluate what your budget can handle to gain excellent long-term health. Then tap one of the images on the right side of the screen, and I'll see you in the next video.